I always believed in Jessie. Through every high and low, every challenge and triumph, she was my anchor. We'd been married for 7 years, and throughout that time, I trusted her completely. We had a solid relationship, or so I thought. Sure, we had our share of disagreements, but who doesn't? In the end, I was confident we were happy. I was certain that whatever storms came our way, we'd weather them together. So when she told me about the company's annual summer party, I didn't think much of it. These gatherings were something of a tradition, a chance for executives and their spouses to mingle and show off to each other. I'd gone with her a few times in the past, and they were always the same. Fancy food, endless small talk, and people trying to prove they were more successful than the next guy. They weren't my scene, but I went for Jessie. That's why it struck me as odd when she mentioned she was attending without me this year. "It's just going to be boring," she said with a dismissive wave. "It's more for the upper management to schmooze with each other. You'll just feel out of place." She had said it so casually, without any hesitation. Looking back, I should have seen that as a red flag. But at the time, I just shrugged it off. "Are you sure?" I'd asked, raising an eyebrow. "I mean, I can go if you want me to." Jessie rolled her eyes and laughed lightly. "Honestly, Sam, don't worry about it. Just enjoy a weekend to yourself for a change." I didn't push. Why would I? There was no reason to think anything was amiss. So I nodded and let it go. After all, what harm could there be in skipping one party? That weekend, she got all dolled up in a new dress, one I hadn't seen before. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, saying she picked it up a few days ago because it was perfect for the event. I didn't think too much about that either. Jessie was always particular about her appearance, always wanting to look her best. But there was something different about her that night. Something in the way she kept glancing at the clock, adjusting her hair in the mirror, and checking her phone. I chalked it up to nerves. Maybe this event was more important to her than she let on. After all, she was in the running for a promotion, and this might be her chance to impress her boss. "Wish me luck," she said with a soft smile, leaning in to kiss me goodbye. The scent of her perfume was strong, almost overpowering. She hadn't worn it in years, not since we were first dating. "You look amazing," I said sincerely, squeezing her hand. "You're going to knock him dead." "Thanks, Sam." Her smile was warm, but there was something off about the way she said my name, almost forced. Before I knew it, she was gone, driving off in her sleek black sedan and leaving me alone in our quiet house. I watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner, a faint sense of unease prickling at the back of my mind. Still, I brushed it off. She was my wife. If she said I wasn't needed at the party, then that was that. So, I poured myself a drink, settled into the couch, and decided to enjoy my weekend to myself, just like she suggested. But as the hours ticked by, I found myself checking my phone more and more. I texted Jessie once around 9, just a quick, "Hope the party's going well," but got no reply. Then again, she was probably busy, caught up in conversation with the higher-ups. That was normal, right? The clock hit midnight and still no word. I started to get restless, pacing around the living room and glancing at my phone every few minutes. I finally caved and dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. Twice. "She's probably just in a noisy room," I muttered to myself, forcing a laugh. But the uneasy feeling was growing stronger, settling in the pit of my stomach like a lead weight. 1 in the morning rolled around. Then 2. Finally, around 3, the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway reached my ears. I peeked out the window and saw her car pulling in, headlights cutting through the dark. She walked in quietly, slipping off her heels by the front door. The instant she saw me standing there, though, she froze, surprise flickering across her face. "Sam, you're still up?" she asked, voice a little too bright. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" I repeated incredulously. "It's 3 in the morning, Jessie. Where have you been?" She blinked at me, clearly unprepared for the confrontation. The party ran late. You know how these things go." 3 in the morning, Jessie?" I shot back. "I called you, texted you. No response. What the hell is going on?" Her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Nothing is going on, Sam. You're overreacting. I told you I was at the party. Why are you acting like this? Because this isn't like you, I exclaimed, throwing my hands up in frustration. You're never out this late, and you always let me know what's happening. Why is this time different? Jessie sighed, running a hand through her hair. I just lost track of time. I'm sorry. Okay? I didn't mean to worry you. There it was. That placating, almost condescending tone that made my blood boil. Like I was some irrational child throwing a tantrum for no reason. But I bit back the urge to argue further. Pushing her now wouldn't get me anywhere. Fine, I said stiffly, turning away. I'm going to bed. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then closed it again, letting out a long breath. Good night, Sam. I didn't respond. I just headed up the stairs, leaving her standing in the dimly lit hallway. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that flash of something unreadable in her gaze when I questioned her. By the time morning came, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. But when I went downstairs, Jessie was already up, humming softly as she brewed coffee. She turned, flashing me a bright smile. Morning. Want some breakfast? I stared at her, trying to reconcile the cheerful woman in front of me with the one who had slunk in at 3 a.m. I'm good, I muttered. Got a lot to do today. Okay, she said easily, not missing a beat. Let me know if you change your mind. I left the house soon after, the unease still gnawing at me. There had to be something I was missing, something she wasn't telling me. The answer came unexpectedly that afternoon, in the form of a casual conversation with a mutual friend, Lisa. We bumped into each other at a cafe downtown, and after exchanging pleasantries, she asked how Jessie and I were doing. Fine, I guess, I replied vaguely. She's been pretty busy with work lately. Yeah, I heard, Lisa said with a small smile. Must be tough, especially with everything going on at the office. I frowned. What do you mean? Lisa blinked, taken aback by my confusion. The promotion, didn't she tell you? The whole reason for that summer party was to celebrate the executives and, well, their spouses. She hesitated. I thought you were going too. My heart skipped a beat as her words sank in. The whole reason for the party was to celebrate executives and their spouses. Why would Jessie lie about something so trivial? Unless she didn't want me there for a reason. But why? What was I missing? I forced a smile, trying to hide the turmoil brewing inside me. No, she didn't mention that, I said lightly. But you know Jessie. Always busy, always on the move. Lisa laughed. Yeah, she's a hard worker. Must be why she's so close with Mr. Reynolds. The name made me stiffen involuntarily. Mr. Reynolds? I echoed, feigning nonchalance. Her boss. No, her boss's boss, Lisa corrected, taking a sip of her coffee. Big guy in the company. She's been spending a lot of time with him lately. Huh? Good for her. Making those connections. The coffee in my hand suddenly tasted bitter. I barely managed to swallow, my mind racing. Jessie had never mentioned Mr. Reynolds to me before. In fact, she barely spoke about her job in detail. Sure, I knew she worked hard, stayed late sometimes, but she always framed it as part of being a team player. She never mentioned who she was working with. I plastered on a smile, though I could feel my expression wavering. Yeah, she's really been pushing herself lately, trying to impress the higher-ups, I guess. Looks like it's working, Lisa replied with a grin. I mean, she was practically the star of the party the other night. Everyone was talking about her. A cold, hollow sensation filled my chest. The star of the party. Jessie had made it sound like some dry, obligatory work event that she didn't even want to go to. Yet here she was drawing attention without me. I see, I murmured, struggling to keep my voice steady. Did you go to the party? Lisa shook her head. No, I heard about it from my husband. He said Jessie looked stunning. Like, really went all out. Said she even danced with Mr. Reynolds a few times. Can you believe that? My fingers tightened around the handle of my coffee cup until my knuckles turned white. Danced with him? Yeah, it's so cute, right? The way he was so attentive to her, making sure she was having a good time. I think she might have caught his eye, Sam. She leaned forward conspiratorially. And you know, a little office romance can't hurt if it means climbing the ladder. The casual way she said it made me want to throw up. Lisa had no idea what her words were doing to me, how each sentence was driving a nail deeper into my chest. I managed a tight smile and mumbled something about needing to get going, before practically fleeing the cafe. I drove around aimlessly, my thoughts a chaotic mess. Lisa's words kept repeating in my head. The star of the party, danced with him, caught his eye. I replayed every moment of the previous night in my mind, every odd glance, every excuse Jessie had given me, and suddenly everything seemed to click into place. She didn't want me there because she knew I'd see. She knew I'd see how she and Mr. Reynolds interacted. She knew I'd see the truth. The rage that boiled up inside me was almost blinding. Jessie, the woman I'd loved and trusted for years, was making a fool out of me. And worse, she wasn't even trying to hide it. I'd been sitting at home, worried sick, while she was off with him, enjoying the night like I didn't even exist. But I couldn't just confront her. Not yet. I needed more than hearsay from Lisa. I needed the truth, undeniable and irrefutable. If Jessie was really involved with her boss's boss, I had to be smart about how I handled this. If she wanted to play games, fine, I'd play. But on my terms. So I started digging. It wasn't hard. A few phone calls here, some sleuthing on social media there, and within hours I had the full picture. Jessie's company was very active online, and I found photos from the party posted on various employees' accounts. And there she was, dressed in a stunning, curve-hugging red gown that made my heart ache just looking at her. But the worst part? She wasn't alone. In almost every photo, Mr. Reynolds was right by her side. They were laughing, smiling, their heads close together like they were sharing secrets. One image even showed them dancing, her hand resting on his chest, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a casual work relationship. This was something else entirely. But that wasn't all. The more I looked, the clearer it became. She was leaning into him, gazing up at him with a soft, adoring expression that I hadn't seen in years. Not since the early days of our marriage, when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. There was no mistaking the look in her eyes. Jessie was falling for him. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. And yet, as much as it hurt, a twisted sense of determination took root inside me. If she thought she could humiliate me like this, if she thought she could waltz back into our home and lie to my face, then she was in for a rude awakening. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I spent the next few days laying the groundwork for what I had in mind. It wasn't enough just to catch her. I wanted her to feel the consequences. I wanted her to realize just how much she'd underestimated me. So I called in a few favors, talked to a friend who worked in HR, got some information I wasn't supposed to have. It turned out Mr. Reynolds wasn't exactly known for keeping his relationships professional. There had been rumors, whispers of inappropriate conduct, but nothing concrete, until now, because I was about to give them all the evidence they needed. When Jessie finally came home that Friday evening, looking tired but satisfied, I was waiting for her. "Hey, babe," she said cheerfully, dropping her bag by the door. "What's for dinner?" I stared at her, barely able to contain the disgust roiling inside me. How could she just walk in here, so casual, so happy, after everything she'd done? "Actually," I said slowly, "we need to talk." The look on her face was priceless. Shock, confusion, and, just for a split second, fear. But then she plastered on that same easy smile. "Sure, what's up?" I folded my arms, leaning against the counter. "How was your party, Jessie?" "The one I wasn't invited to." Her smile faltered. I told you it was fine." "Why?" "Because I saw the pictures," I said quietly. "You and your boss. Or should I say, your boss's boss." The color drained from her face. What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I hissed, finally letting the anger show. "All those late nights, all those excuses. You didn't think I'd find out, did you? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, Jessie seemed completely at a loss. The sight should have brought me satisfaction, but instead, it only deepened the ache in my chest. How could someone I trusted so completely look so guilty, so trapped? Sam, she stammered, finally finding her voice. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I interrupted coldly. Don't even try to spin this, Jessie. I have proof. You and Mr. Reynolds getting cozy, dancing all night, looking like a perfect couple. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? She paled even more, her eyes wide and desperate. Sam, please listen. It wasn't like that. He's just a colleague. A colleague, I scoffed, letting out a bitter laugh. You expect me to believe that? I've seen the photos, Jessie. You were practically draped over him. Her hands flew to her mouth, and she took a shaky step back. It's just business, Sam. Networking. You know how it is. I'm trying to get ahead, make a name for myself. So you decided to use your body? I spat, my voice dripping with contempt. Is that what it takes to get promoted these days? Because I sure didn't see you trying to network like that with anyone else. Jessie flinched, tears welling up in her eyes. But I felt no sympathy. Not now. Please, she whispered. It was just one night. Just dancing. I swear. I would never. I didn't mean to. To what? Get caught. I finished for her. Or are you going to tell me you didn't notice how close he was holding you? How his hand lingered a little too long? Or how you smiled up at him like he was the only person in the room? Her breath hitched, and she looked away, her face crumpling. It wasn't like that, she repeated weakly, but I could see the truth in her eyes. The lies were falling apart, unraveling before us, and she was grasping at straws. Save it, I snarled, stepping closer until we were only inches apart. I'm done listening to your excuses. Because here's the thing, Jessie. I've been doing some digging. Turns out your networking wasn't as harmless as you're making it sound. She froze, staring up at me with wide, terrified eyes. What do you mean? I growled. That your precious Mr. Reynolds has a history. There have been complaints against him before. Women he's gotten too friendly with, using his position to get what he wants. And now it looks like you are the latest on his list. Her expression shifted rapidly, from fear to confusion to horror. That's not true. He would never. I'm not. Oh, I believe it, I sneered. But the question is, what did you do to encourage him? Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you were enjoying the attention. No, she cried, shaking her head frantically. I never. It's just work, Sam. I didn't realize. I didn't think. He's my boss. I thought I had to. To what? I pressed, my voice a dangerous whisper. Flirt with him? Let him hold you? Dance with him like you're his plaything? If that's what you have to do to keep your job, then maybe you should think about finding a new one. Her face twisted in anguish, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the way she'd looked at him in those photos, how she'd smiled, how she'd leaned into his touch, and the doubt vanished, replaced by cold, hard resolve. You can try to justify it all you want, I said flatly. But the bottom line is, you lied to me. You kept this from me. And now I know why. She seemed to collapse inward, her shoulders shaking as silent sobs racked her body. Sam, please, she whimpered, reaching out to touch me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you. I just wanted to. Don't you dare say you love me, I snapped, jerking away from her touch like it burned. Because that's not what love looks like, Jessie. Love is honesty. Love is respect. Love isn't sneaking around behind my back, cozying up to your boss because you think it'll get you ahead. I didn't. Save it, I barked, cutting her off. I'm done. You want to be with him so badly? Fine. But you're going to have to do it without me. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock. What do you mean? I mean, I'm leaving you, I said coldly. I'm filing for divorce. And trust me, Jesse, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly why. The blood drained from her face. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. You can't. Sam, please, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't cheat on you. Maybe not yet, I agreed quietly. But you would have. It's only a matter of time. And I'm not sticking around to watch it happen. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessie stared at me, her chest heaving, her entire body trembling. And in that moment I saw it, true, genuine fear. She was losing control. She'd always been the one in charge, the one who manipulated situations to her advantage. But now I held all the cards. You can't do this, she whispered desperately. Please, Sam, don't leave me. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again. Just please don't leave. It was pathetic, really, watching her crumble like that, begging and pleading. And maybe, if I were a weaker man, I would have given in. Maybe I would have stayed, let her twist things around until somehow I ended up apologizing to her. But I wasn't weak. Not anymore. No, I said softly, my voice hard as steel. It's too late, Jessie. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she sank to her knees, sobbing. Sam, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't. Goodbye, Jessie, I said, turning away. And as I walked out the door, her cries echoing behind me, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Because this time I was the one leaving her. And I was going to make sure she paid for every single lie. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and strategic planning. Jessie had no idea what was coming. I made sure to keep everything quiet, moving my assets, securing my finances, consulting with my lawyer to make sure I'd get the upper hand in the divorce. And once I was ready, I went for the jugular. The day the papers were served was the day Jessie's world began to crumble. I made sure of that. I didn't want a clean break. No, I wanted her to feel every bit of betrayal, every ounce of pain she'd inflicted on me. And when she opened that envelope, her face turned a shade of white I'd never seen before. It was almost satisfying. Almost. You're divorcing me? She choked out, staring at the documents as if they were a death sentence. Yes, I replied calmly. I told you I was done, Jessie. This is what done looks like. But the house, she stammered. The cars, the savings. It's all mine, I interrupted coldly. Every single asset is in my name. You signed the prenup, remember? You don't get a cent. Her eyes went wide with realization, her mouth opening and closing in stunned disbelief. But you wouldn't. You can't. I can, I corrected sharply. And I have. You're going to walk away from this with nothing, Jessie. No house, no money, no security. You wanted to risk everything for your precious boss? Well, now you have the freedom to see if he's worth it. She looked as if she'd been slapped, her eyes filling with fresh tears. Sam, please, she whimpered, her voice breaking. You can't just throw me away like this. I'll have nowhere to go, nowhere to live. That's not my problem, I said flatly. You should have thought about that before you decided to play games with me. But I didn't. She clutched the papers in trembling hands, her gaze darting frantically over the legal jargon. I didn't cheat, Sam. I never. Emotionally, you did. I snapped. Don't try to downplay it. I don't care if you didn't actually sleep with him. Your intentions were clear. You betrayed me, Jessie. You lied. That's all I need to know. The truth was, I wasn't even interested in whether or not she'd slept with him. Maybe she hadn't, maybe she had. It didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. The moment she'd crossed that line, the moment she'd kept secrets and acted like her career was more important than our marriage, she'd lost me. But you can't. She shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. Sam, I'll lose my job. Oh, we're not done yet. I cut in smoothly. See, I've been keeping an eye on your boss too. Did you really think I'd let him get away with this? No. I'm going to make sure that arrogant jerk pays for trying to destroy my marriage. Her face paled even further, and she stumbled back a step. What are you talking about? I mean, I said, savoring the moment, that I've filed a formal complaint against him. Harassment, inappropriate conduct, using his position to prey on female employees. The company's investigating him as we speak. Her eyes went impossibly wide. You can't do that. It's not true. He didn't. Oh, but it is, I said with a twisted smile. I have evidence, Jessie. Photos, emails, even a few recordings of your little late-night calls. You've been sloppy, sweetheart. I doubt you even realized just how much he was pushing you. But that's what predators like him do, don't they? They manipulate, coerce. And now, thanks to me, the whole company's going to know exactly what kind of man he is. Her lips parted in horror, and she took a step toward me, her hands raised pleadingly. Sam, please don't do this. If he loses his job, I'll lose yours too. I finished for her. Probably. You're implicated, Jessie. At best, they'll fire you for unprofessional behavior. At worst, they'll think you were complicit. Either way, it's going to be very hard for you to get another job after this. No, she whispered, shaking her head frantically. No, please, I need this job. I worked so hard. You had everything, I said softly, stepping closer until we were face to face. A loving husband, a stable home, a good life. But you threw it away. Now you're going to have to deal with the consequences. The reality of her situation seemed to crash over her in waves, and she sank to her knees, sobbing. Please, Sam, I'll do anything. I'll leave him. I'll go back to being the wife you wanted. Just, please, don't take this away from me. I looked down at her, my heart as cold as ice. Maybe once, a long time ago, I would have caved. Maybe I would have forgiven her, tried to patch things up, given her a second chance. But not now. Not after everything. No, I said quietly. You don't get to rewrite the past. You don't get to erase what you did. You're going to lose everything, Jessie. Just like I did. Her sobs filled the room, and for a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered all the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, the pain of wondering if I was enough. And the pity evaporated, replaced by a dark, grim satisfaction. I'll make it up to you, she begged, her voice raw and desperate. You can't. I cut her off coldly. There's nothing left to make up. Our marriage is over. You're going to sign those papers, and then you're going to walk away with nothing. And when your boss goes down, you're going to lose your job, too. Her sobs turned to wails, but I stood firm, unmoved. This was what she deserved. She'd gambled with my trust, with our relationship, and now she was paying the price. And I wasn't going to let her slither her way out of it. Please, she whispered one last time, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. I'm begging you, Sam. Don't leave me like this. I have nowhere to go. No one. That's not my concern, I said coldly. You made your bed, Jessie. Now you have to lie in it. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving her sobbing on the floor. It was done. I'd won. I'd taken everything from her, just like she'd taken everything from me. And as I stepped out into the crisp, cool air, I felt a strange, hollow satisfaction, because for the first time in a long time I was free. After walking out that door, I didn't look back. Jessie's cries echoed in my ears long after I left, but I pushed them aside. It wasn't my job to care anymore. I'd done what I needed to do, and there was no going back. The paperwork was in motion, the lawyers were on it, and everything was falling into place just as I had planned. The next few weeks were liberating in a way. With Jessie out of my life, I found a strange sort of peace settling over me. I focused on my work, poured my energy into new projects, and threw myself into the gym. Every time I lifted a weight or pushed through a grueling workout, I felt like I was shedding another layer of the anger and resentment that had built up inside me for so long. But that didn't mean I was done with her just yet. No, there was still one more piece of the puzzle to complete. Jessie thought she'd hit rock bottom when she found out she was losing me and everything that came with it. But she had no idea how much further she had to fall. I promised to ruin her boss's career, and I meant every word. The complaint I'd filed against him was just the beginning. Turns out, he'd been involved in more than just inappropriate conduct. Digging into his past, I found out that he'd been skimming company funds, covering it up with false invoices, and using his position to bully others into silence. He was a grade-A scumbag, and I was more than happy to speed up his downfall. With every piece of evidence I uncovered, I made sure to pass it along anonymously to the company's higher-ups. I wanted them to know exactly who they had running the show, and it didn't take long for the house of cards to start crumbling. The first sign came in the form of a mass email to all employees. The company was launching an internal investigation, and effective immediately, Jesse's boss was placed on suspension. Rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers about harassment, inappropriate relationships, and, of course, financial misconduct. People were shocked, angry, confused. But one thing was clear: his career was on the line. For Jesse, that meant the walls were closing in fast. I got updates through mutual acquaintances, friends who still worked at the company and were more than happy to spill the tea. Jessie was panicking. She'd been questioned several times by HR, grilled about her relationship with her boss, about her involvement in certain projects, and whether or not she'd been complicit in covering up his dirty deeds. She tried to play innocent, of course. Told them she had no idea, that she'd only ever been professional. But the company didn't buy it. With her boss suspended and the investigation widening, they needed a scapegoat. And Jessie was the perfect candidate. They fired her within a week. Apparently, it was brutal. She was called into a meeting with HR, handed her termination notice, and escorted out of the building like a criminal. No goodbyes, no second chances. Just a cold, hard dismissal. She'd gone from being a rising star to being blacklisted in the industry, all in the span of a few days. When I heard the news, I couldn't help but smile. But that wasn't the end of it. Oh no. Jessie had always been financially dependent on me, living off the lifestyle I provided. She'd never bothered to save, never thought she'd need to. And now, without a job, without a place to go, and with our divorce on the brink of being finalized, she was truly, utterly screwed. The house? Gone. I was selling it and pocketing every penny. The cars? In my name. Her credit cards? Cancelled. She had no source of income, no savings, and no safety net to catch her. I'd made sure of that. All she had left was her pride, and even that was crumbling fast. I knew she was struggling. I got a call from a mutual friend, someone who didn't know the full story, saying that Jessie had been couch surfing, hopping from one friend's place to another, begging for a place to stay. She was a wreck, apparently, desperate, lost, trying to hold on to the last shreds of her dignity. And then, a few days later, she called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear the brokenness in her voice, the desperation. I wanted to know just how far she'd fallen. Sam. Her voice was small, hesitant. Jessie, I replied coolly. What do you want? There was a long pause, and I could almost hear her struggling to find the words. I need your help, she whispered finally. Help? I let out a cold laugh. You're joking, right? After everything you did, you think I'm going to help you? Please, she begged. Just listen. I have nowhere to go. I've lost my job, and I don't have any money. I just need a little help, just to get back on my feet. I can't. That's not my problem, Jessie. I cut her off sharply. You made your choices. You put your career, your boss, above everything else. Now you have to deal with the fallout. Sam, please, she whimpered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. I'm begging you. Just let me stay at the house for a few days until I figure things out. Please, The house isn't yours anymore, I said flatly. And even if it was, I wouldn't let you set foot inside. You wanted to risk it all for your career, for your little fling with your boss? Well, here's your reward. Enjoy it. There was a strangled sob on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. Almost. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the way she'd thrown our marriage away like it meant nothing. No, I said quietly. You're on your own, Jesse. Don't call me again. And then I hung up. It should have felt satisfying. Hearing her break down, hearing her beg. But there was no joy in it. No thrill. Just a hollow emptiness. Maybe because, deep down, I knew it didn't change anything. I'd won. I'd destroyed her life, just like she'd destroyed mine. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt sad. But that was the price of betrayal. And Jesse was paying every penny of it. After that call, I thought I'd put Jesse out of my mind for good. I'd moved on emotionally, financially, even physically. But life has a strange way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when I thought she was out of my life forever, Jessie somehow found a way to worm herself back into my world. I didn't hear from her directly again. No more desperate calls, no pleading messages. She must have finally gotten the hint that I wanted nothing to do with her. But then, about a month later, I started getting emails. The first one was from a former coworker of hers, someone I barely knew. The subject line read, "Jessie's in trouble. Can you help?" I almost deleted it on the spot, but something made me open it. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the lingering anger that still bubbled up every time I thought of her. Either way, I found myself clicking on the email and skimming through the message. The guy, let's call him Mark, said he was worried about Jessie, that she'd been staying with different people, couch surfing from place to place, and now, she'd run out of options. Mark mentioned that she tried to find a new job, but with the investigation and her former boss's disgrace hanging over her head, no one in the industry wanted to touch her. She was radioactive. "Her situation's really bad, man," Mark had written. "I don't know what went down between you two, but if there's any way you can help, she needs it." I deleted the email without replying. Whatever she was going through, it was her own doing. I didn't know her anything. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Besides, if she was really struggling, she could reach out to her family. I wasn't her lifeline anymore, but the emails didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, I got messages from old friends, mutual acquaintances, and even people I barely knew. They all seemed to be saying the same thing. Jessie was in freefall and no one could catch her. They told me she'd been staying at cheap motels, living off whatever scraps she could scrounge up, and that her mental state was deteriorating fast. "Just reach out," one email pleaded. "She's not asking for money. She just needs someone to talk to. Please, Sam, I know you're angry, but don't let her end up on the streets." Each message sent a jolt through me, a mix of anger and something else. Something I didn't want to name. Guilt? No, I shouldn't feel guilty. Not after what she did. She betrayed me, cheated on me, lied to my face. I owed her nothing. But despite myself, I couldn't ignore the nagging thoughts that began to creep into my mind. Thoughts of her alone, broke, and desperate. Thoughts of what I'd said to her the last time we spoke. I had wanted her to pay for what she'd done. But had I gone too far? No, I couldn't let myself think like that. I'd already done more than enough by not dragging her name through the mud publicly. I had my life back on track, and I wasn't about to let her mess it up again. Still, the emails kept coming, and each one chipped away at my resolve a little more. It all came to a head one afternoon when I got a message from someone I hadn't expected. Jessie's younger sister, Emma. We'd never been close. She'd always thought I was too serious, too focused on my work. But now she was reaching out, practically begging me to intervene. "Sam," she wrote, "I know you have every right to hate her. I know she messed up. But please, don't let her go down this path. She's not in a good place. I'm scared for her. You don't have to forgive her, but at least make sure she's safe." Her words cut through me in a way I hadn't expected. Emma wasn't the type to ask for help, and for her to be this desperate meant things were really bad. I found myself staring at the email, my hand hovering over the mouse. For the first time since I'd walked out on Jessie, doubt began to creep in. Was this really what I wanted? To see her completely destroyed, with nothing and no one? When I'd vowed to ruin her, I hadn't pictured this. Her family begging for my help because she had nowhere else to turn. I took a deep breath, shaking my head. No, I couldn't let myself get sucked back in. Jessie had made her choices. She was the one who'd thrown away our marriage, who'd betrayed me. This was the price she had to pay. But as I sat there, the cursor blinking in front of me, something shifted. Maybe it was Emma's words. Maybe it was the memories of all the good times before everything went to hell. Or maybe it was just the realization that I didn't want to be the kind of man who could leave someone, anyone, to suffer like that. Before I could overthink it, I clicked reply. I kept my response short. Told Emma that I'd think about it, that I'd consider reaching out if she really had no one else. It was more than I'd ever intended to do. But even as I hit send, I knew I couldn't leave it at that. The next day, I called in a favor. One of my contacts, a private investigator I'd worked with in the past, owed me big time. I asked him to look into Jessie's situation, find out where she was staying, what she was doing. I needed to know the truth before I made any decisions. It didn't take long for him to get back to me. "She's in bad shape, Sam," he said bluntly over the phone. "I found her holed up in some rundown motel on the outskirts of town. She's behind on rent, practically living off of instant noodles. The manager's threatening to kick her out if she doesn't pay up by the end of the week." A cold lump settled in my stomach. This was worse than I'd imagined. I thought she might be struggling. Sure. But this was a whole other level. "And her mental state?" I asked quietly. "She's not doing great," he admitted. "Looks like she's been drinking a lot, barely eating. She's lost a ton of weight. If she keeps this up, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up in the hospital. Or worse." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd wanted to hurt her, to see her suffer. But I hadn't wanted this. "Do you want me to do something?" he asked cautiously. "I can drop a hint to someone. Maybe get her into a shelter or—" "No," I interrupted, my voice tight. I'll handle it." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. I'd ruined Jessie's life, just like I'd promised. But now, standing at the edge of the abyss I'd pushed her into, I realized that I didn't have the stomach to watch her fall any further. Something had to change. And like it or not, I was the only one who could make it happen. I spent the rest of that night wrestling with what to do. Every instinct told me to let Jessie deal with the mess she'd created, to let her finally face the consequences of her own actions. But there was a nagging voice in the back of my mind, Emma's words echoing over and over again, painting a picture of Jessie not as the calculating, selfish person I'd built her up to be in my mind, but as someone lost, broken, and utterly alone. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to reach out to her directly. That felt too close, too personal. Instead, I contacted my investigator again and told him to do one more thing for me. "Get her into a decent place," I said. "Something clean, safe. I'll cover the first few months' rent, and I want you to keep an eye on her, make sure she's not, spiraling." He was silent for a moment, and I could almost feel the question hovering on his lips. "Why? Why do you care?" But he was a professional and he didn't pry. "I'll take care of it," he said simply. True to his word, he found Jessie a small, furnished apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, but a massive step up from the dingy motel she'd been living in. I made sure to keep everything anonymous. The lease signed under a fake name, rent funneled through a third party so she wouldn't know I had anything to do with it. The last thing I wanted was for her to think this was some kind of reconciliation. It wasn't. It was, I don't know, maybe just the right thing to do. After that, I tried to put her out of my mind again. My own life was picking up speed. Work projects were piling up, and I'd even started dating again, dipping my toe back into the world I'd avoided for so long. I found myself laughing more, smiling even. Jessie had been a shadow over my life for so long, and now, with her safely out of sight, I thought I might finally be able to move forward. But life has a way of pulling you back just when you think you're free. About a month after I set up the apartment for her, I got a call from my investigator again. There was a hint of hesitation in his voice, which immediately set off alarms in my head. "What's going on?" I demanded. "There's been a development," he said carefully. "It's Jessie. She's been trying to find you." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. What do you mean? Find me? How? She's been asking around. Friends, old co-workers, even your family. She's been looking for a way to contact you, saying it's important. I'm not sure how serious she is, but, well, she's persistent. My heart pounded, a mix of anger and confusion. Why would she be looking for me now? After everything that had happened, what could she possibly want? My first instinct was to cut her off completely, to tell my investigator to put a stop to it, to make sure she never found me. But something made me pause. What did she say? I asked slowly. Did she mention why? There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear the investigator shuffling papers, as if looking for something. From what I gathered, he said finally, she's scared. She kept saying she needed to warn you about something, but she wouldn't go into detail. It sounded strange. Warn me? The thought made no sense. What could Jessie possibly warn me about? She'd lost her job, her reputation, and her dignity. What else was there? Let her look, I said quietly, my mind racing. Don't interfere, but keep me updated. If she gets too close, let me know. Are you sure? He asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. I mean, after everything. I'm sure, I said firmly. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time, my thoughts churning. Jessie trying to find me wasn't part of the plan. I'd expected her to lay low, lick her wounds, maybe pick herself back up one day. But this felt different, desperate even. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. She'd never find me. I'd made sure of that. And whatever she thought she needed to tell me, it couldn't be anything worth hearing. I had my life back on track, and I wasn't about to let her derail it again. But as the days went by, I found myself growing more uneasy. I started jumping every time my phone rang, wondering if it would be my investigator with news. Every unfamiliar email made my stomach twist. And then, one afternoon, I got a message that changed everything. It was from Jessie. No subject line, no long-winded explanation. Just a single, short sentence that sent a chill down my spine. He knows about the apartment. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. Who? Who could she be talking about? No one knew about the apartment. Not even her, supposedly. I'd gone through so much trouble to keep it under wraps, to make sure no one would connect the dots back to me. So how could she possibly know? My fingers trembled as I typed out a response. What are you talking about? Who knows? The reply came almost instantly. My boss. He's been following me. I think he knows what you did to him. A bolt of fear shot through me. Her boss? The one whose career I'd helped destroy? I'd known there might be blowback from that, but this was a whole new level. Had he really gone so far as to stalk her? To track down her every move just to get back at me? My mind raced as I tried to piece it together. Was this some twisted form of revenge? Was he using Jessie as a pawn to get to me? And if so, how much did he really know? Another message popped up on the screen, breaking through my spiraling thoughts. He's watching me, Sam, and I think he's going to come for you next. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just some idle threat. This was real, and it was coming for me. All this time, I thought I was in control, that I'd won. But now, staring at Jessie's panicked messages, I realized just how wrong I'd been, because I wasn't the only one who knew how to play dirty. And if Jessie's warning was true, then I might have just made the biggest mistake of my life. Panic surged through me as I stared at the screen, my heart racing. The reality of the situation started to sink in. Jessie's boss had been lurking in the shadows, and I had unwittingly pulled a thread that could unravel everything I had worked for. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head now, that the game I thought I'd won was still very much in play. I typed a quick response, my fingers flying over the keys. What do you mean he's watching you? What does he want? The wait for her reply felt like an eternity, my anxiety creeping in with every passing second. When her response finally came, it was shorter than I'd expected. I don't know what he wants, but he's been asking about you, asking people who know you. I'm scared, Sam. I think he might come after you. Fear gripped me as I tried to comprehend the implications. I hadn't considered that my actions might have far-reaching consequences. I thought I was just evening the score, taking back control of my life, but now it felt like I had set off a chain reaction that could destroy everything I had rebuilt. "Stay away from him," I replied, urgency creeping into my words. "Don't engage with him. You need to lay low." I paced my apartment, my thoughts racing. Should I go to the police? Was that overreacting? My instincts told me to stay under the radar, to keep a low profile, but could I trust Jessie to do the same? She had made some disastrous choices in the past, and her current mindset was clearly erratic. A thought struck me. I had to warn her boss, put him on notice. He needed to understand that I wasn't going to let him intimidate me or Jessie. I reached for my phone, quickly dialing my investigator's number. "Get me everything you can on Jessie's boss," I ordered as soon as he picked up. "I need to know who he is and what he's about." "Already on it," he replied. "But you should know this might not be the best idea. If he's got a bone to pick, confronting him might only escalate the situation." I didn't care. I needed to establish dominance, to remind everyone involved that I was not someone to be trifled with. I'd spent years letting Jessie walk all over me. I wouldn't let this man do the same. Minutes turned into hours as I waited for the investigator to gather the information. I felt trapped in my own mind, wondering if I was making a colossal mistake. Maybe the best course of action was to simply disappear again, to go off the grid until this whole thing blew over. But deep down, I knew that wasn't me anymore. I couldn't live in fear. I had to take a stand. Finally, my phone buzzed with a notification. The investigator had sent over a dossier. I opened it eagerly, scanning the contents for anything that might give me the upper hand. His name was Greg Dawson, and he had quite the reputation in the industry, a powerful player with connections that reached deep into corporate America. But as I read further, a different story began to unfold. It turned out Dawson had a history of aggressive behavior, complaints of harassment, bullying, and an unhealthy obsession with his subordinates. Jessie had likely been another pawn in his game, another name on his list of conquests. "This guy is bad news," I muttered to myself, my determination hardening. "I can't let him get away with this." The investigator's notes included details about Dawson's recent activities, and one stood out. He had been spotted at a local bar frequently, holding court with his cronies. It was a place where he often went to let off steam, a dark corner of the city that attracted people like him, those who craved power and control. I felt a spark ignite within me. If Dawson was looking for a confrontation, I would give him one. I would find a way to confront him on my terms, to show him that I wasn't a victim, that I was done being anyone's pawn. After a few hours of gathering my thoughts, I made my plan. I'd head to that bar tonight, walk in like I owned the place, and confront Dawson face to face. I'd look him in the eye and tell him to back off. I knew it was risky, but I was done running. As I prepped myself for the evening, my phone buzzed again. Jessie was reaching out once more. "Please, don't do anything reckless. You don't understand how dangerous he can be." I felt my anger flare. How dare she try to control me now? She had put me in this situation. She had invited chaos into my life. I didn't reply. I couldn't afford to get pulled back into her drama. This was about me now. As the night wore on, I got dressed, slipping into a fitted black shirt and jeans, looking every bit the part of a man who meant business. I made my way to the bar, each step heavy with purpose and adrenaline. My heart pounded, but I refused to let fear dictate my actions. When I arrived, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and loud conversations. I spotted him almost immediately. Greg Dawson, sitting at the bar, surrounded by a group of sycophants who hung on his every word. He exuded confidence, and I could see the power he wielded over them. I approached slowly, my heart racing with anticipation. With each step, I could feel the tension in the air shift. Conversations halted, and heads turned as I walked straight up to him, locking my gaze onto his. "Greg Dawson," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "We need to talk." He turned, surprise flickering in his eyes before it was quickly replaced by amusement. "And who might you be?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Someone you should be very concerned about," I replied, leaning in slightly so he could see the seriousness in my eyes. "Stay away from Jessie. You're making a mistake if you think you can intimidate her or me." The smirk on his face faded, replaced by a calculating look. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, do you?" he said, leaning back as if he found my words entertaining. I took a breath, pushing down the surge of anger. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who hides behind a title and abuses his power." His laugh echoed around us, drawing the attention of the nearby patrons. "You think you can threaten me? This is cute." "It's not a threat," I shot back, my voice firm. "It's a warning. I fought my way back from worse than you. Don't test me." He leaned forward, his expression turning serious for a moment. "You're treading on dangerous ground, my friend, but I admire your guts. Just remember, I can make your life hell in ways you can't even imagine." I smiled, feeling an unexpected sense of satisfaction. "Then let's make it a game. Just know that I'm not the one you should be afraid of." With that, I turned on my heel, leaving him and his entourage stunned. I walked out of the bar, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had stepped into the lion's den and come out unscathed. But as I walked back to my car, the nagging doubt returned. Had I made a grave mistake? Would Dawson take this as a challenge? I needed to be ready for whatever was coming next. This battle was far from over. As I drove home, my mind raced with the confrontation I had just faced. The thrill of standing up to Dawson was quickly overshadowed by an unsettling feeling. This man was dangerous, and I knew he wouldn't let my words slide without retaliation. I pulled into my driveway, staring at my home, my sanctuary that now felt more like a cage. Inside, I moved about like a ghost, the adrenaline slowly dissipating, leaving a sense of heaviness in its wake. I made a drink, hoping to wash away the anxiety that clung to me. The weight of my decisions loomed large, and the reality of my life choices began to settle in. My mind drifted to Jessie, the woman I had fought for, the woman who had betrayed my trust. The thought of her made my stomach churn. I tried to shake it off and sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. As I glanced at my phone, I saw her name flash across the screen. She had sent me a series of messages, each one filled with pleading and desperation. I couldn't ignore the knot tightening in my chest as I read her words. "Sam, please, you have to understand. I never wanted this to happen. I'm scared. I don't know what he's capable of. Please talk to me." The last message tugged at something deep within me, a mix of anger and lingering affection. I took a deep breath, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely, to let her stew in the mess she had created. But another part, the part that still cared for her, felt the need to at least acknowledge her. "You put me in this situation. You need to deal with your choices." I hit send and set the phone down, not wanting to get sucked into another long conversation. I had made my choice. I wouldn't be her emotional crutch any longer. Hours passed, and the late evening turned into night. I struggled to sleep, tossing and turning as visions of Dawson and Jessie filled my mind. The anger roared back to life, not just at Dawson but at Jessie as well. How could she have let this happen? How could she have put me in this position? I wanted revenge, but I knew it would have to be calculated. As the sun began to rise, I finally drifted off, exhausted. I dreamt of a world where I was free from Jessie's deceit, a world where I could reclaim my life. But when I woke up, the harsh reality set in. I still had to face the mess we were in, and Dawson was not going to make it easy. Over the next few days, I kept a close eye on Jessie, noticing her erratic behavior. She was distracted, frequently checking her phone, her anxiety palpable. It was clear that Dawson was still in the picture, and it frustrated me to no end. One evening, after a long day of contemplating my next move, I received an unexpected text from her. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you about Dawson." The request sent a rush of emotions through me. I had told myself that I wouldn't get sucked back into her drama, but curiosity piqued my interest. I agreed to meet her at a local cafe, figuring it would be a good opportunity to gauge her state of mind and plan my next move against Dawson. When I arrived, I found Jessie already sitting at a table, nervously tapping her fingers on her phone. She looked up, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I had fallen in love with, but it was quickly replaced by the reality of our situation. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice shaky. I took a seat, trying to keep my expression neutral. "What do you want to talk about?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands before meeting my gaze. "It's about Dawson. He's been acting strange since your confrontation." "Strange how?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "He's been more aggressive with me at work, and I think he's trying to manipulate me into staying close. He keeps telling me that I need to keep my job secure," she explained, her eyes wide with fear. "I think he knows about us." My heart raced. The thought of Dawson using Jessie to get to me only fueled my anger. "What do you mean, about us?" "He's threatening to ruin me if I don't comply with what he wants," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to do. I felt a mix of anger and sympathy. While part of me wanted to yell at her for putting herself in this position, another part of me recognized that she was scared. She had entered into a toxic game, and it was consuming her. "You need to stand up for yourself," I said firmly. "You can't let him control you. I can't just quit. I need this job, Sam. If I lose it, I lose everything," she pleaded, her voice rising slightly. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Then we need to find a way to handle him. You can't let him win." "I don't know how," she said, tears welling in her eyes. My heart softened despite the anger still bubbling beneath the surface. "I'll help you, but you have to be honest with me. No more secrets, Jessie. I need to know everything." She nodded, wiping away a tear. "Okay, I promise." We spent the next hour discussing her interactions with Dawson, piecing together a plan to expose him for who he really was. It was risky, but the more we talked, the clearer it became. I was willing to fight for her, not just for her sake but for my own. As we left the cafe, I felt a new sense of determination wash over me. I wasn't going to let Dawson dictate our lives anymore. The battle was on, and I would fight with everything I had to protect what was mine. With the sun setting behind us, I felt a mix of adrenaline and anxiety coursing through my veins. Jessie and I had laid the groundwork for our plan, but I knew that the road ahead was going to be rocky. I was filled with a new sense of purpose, ready to take on Dawson, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this was a dangerous game we were playing. In the following days, I kept a close watch on Jessie. She seemed more committed to the plan, but the tension was still palpable. Dawson had become more aggressive, and it was clear he was testing her limits. I advised her to document everything, every interaction, every threat. I wanted to build a case against him, not only to protect her but also to show her that she was stronger than she believed. One evening, as we sat at my place going over her notes, Jessie suddenly froze, her eyes wide with terror. "Sam, I think he's been watching me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "I saw him outside the office today. He was just sitting in his car, staring at the building. I felt like he was waiting for me," she explained, her hands shaking as she fidgeted with her notes. "Did you get a license plate?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "No, I didn't even think to look. I just wanted to get out of there," she admitted, biting her lip. "What if he knows that I'm talking to you?" The thought sent a chill down my spine. "We need to be careful. He's a manipulative guy, and if he senses you're pulling away, he might lash out." Jessie nodded, her eyes darting around as if she expected Dawson to burst through the door. "What if he tries to hurt me? What if he tries to ruin my career?" I reached across the table and took her hands in mine, grounding her. "We'll figure this out. You have me on your side now, and we'll make sure he doesn't get to you." We continued to strategize, brainstorming ways to gather more evidence against Dawson. The more we talked, the more determined I felt to take him down. It wasn't just about Jessie anymore. It was about reclaiming control over our lives. A few days later, as I was going over some of Jessie's notes, I received a call from her. The urgency in her voice sent alarm bells ringing. Sam, you need to come to my office. Dawson just fired me. What? Why? I exclaimed, feeling the anger flare up within me. He said he couldn't have someone who isn't fully committed to the team. I think he knows I've been talking to you, she replied, her voice shaky. I felt a wave of rage wash over me, but I quickly masked it. Stay calm. I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there. When I arrived at her office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Dawson was in a meeting, but I could see Jessie sitting at her desk, visibly shaken. I approached her, my heart heavy with concern. Are you okay? She nodded, but the fear in her eyes told me otherwise. He just went off on me, Sam. I'm scared he's going to spread rumors or something. Don't worry about that right now. We'll handle this. I reassured her, but I could feel my fists clenching at my sides. I wanted to confront Dawson right then and there, but I knew that wouldn't help Jessie. Instead, I decided to gather evidence first. Let's go to HR. We need to file a complaint against him. Jessie hesitated, her anxiety clear. What if they don't believe me? What if he spins it so that it looks like I'm the problem? I looked her in the eyes, my voice firm. You deserve to be heard, Jessie. And with everything we've documented, we have a solid case. Trust me. After a moment of silence, she nodded, her determination returning. Together, we walked into the HR office, where I laid out everything we had gathered, Jessie's notes, her documentation of Dawson's behavior, and my account of what had happened. The HR manager listened intently, taking notes and asking questions. I could see the concern growing on her face as we recounted the details of Jessie's treatment at the hands of Dawson. After what felt like hours, the manager promised to investigate and assured us that Jessie wouldn't be retaliated against for speaking up. As we left the office, a sense of relief washed over me, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. What now? Jessie asked, her voice still shaky but filled with a hint of hope. Now we wait and see what HR finds. But I want you to stay alert. Dawson will likely try to cover his tracks, and I'm sure he'll pull something to discredit you, I replied. As the days passed, Jessie and I maintained a low profile, trying to avoid any confrontation with Dawson. But tension hung in the air like a storm cloud, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he struck back. Days turned into a week, and the atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. Jessie and I spent every moment we could together, trying to devise a strategy for when Dawson inevitably retaliated. But as each day passed, it became clearer that he was a master manipulator, and I feared he would stop at nothing to regain control over Jessie and me. One evening, as we sat in my living room going over notes from HR's initial findings, Jessie's phone buzzed on the coffee table. She picked it up and her face paled. It's him, she whispered. Dawson, I asked, my pulse quickening. She nodded, staring at the screen as if it were a snake ready to strike. I could see her hands tremble as she swiped to open the message. What does it say? I urged, leaning closer. He's threatening to spread lies about me at my next job interview, she said, her voice shaking. He knows I'm looking for something new. He said if I don't play along with him, I'll never work in this industry again. A surge of rage surged through me, and I felt my fists clench involuntarily. That bastard. He thinks he can intimidate you? We can't let him get away with this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm scared, Sam. What if he does ruin my career? I can't let that happen, Jessie replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my rising anger. Listen to me. We've been gathering evidence, and we're in the right here. We'll fight back. We can't let him win. Jessie nodded, but I could see the fear still etched on her face. What do we do? She asked. I leaned back, considering our options. We need to take the fight to him. If he thinks he can bully you, then we need to show him we're not afraid. Maybe we can get him to slip up, say something that would hurt his reputation, I suggested. I don't want to stoop to his level, Sam. I just want this to be over, she said, her voice filled with frustration. I know, but we need to play this smart. I'll be with you every step of the way. Let's set up a meeting with him, I proposed. Jesse's eyes widened. You mean with Dawson? Are you sure that's a good idea? Yes. If we confront him together, we can get him to show his true colors, I said firmly. He'll be more likely to slip up if he thinks he has the upper hand. After some back and forth, Jesse reluctantly agreed to the plan. We decided to reach out to Dawson, asking for a meeting to discuss the situation. The moment we hit send on that email, I felt a rush of adrenaline. A day later, Dawson replied, suggesting a meeting at a cafe near the office. Jesse and I exchanged nervous glances. This is it, she said, a mix of fear and resolve in her voice. On the day of the meeting, I could feel the tension radiating from Jesse as we walked to the cafe. Just remember, stay calm. Don't let him get under your skin, I reminded her. When we arrived, Dawson was already seated at a table, his smug demeanor making my blood boil. I took a deep breath and we approached him together. Dawson, I said, my voice steady. Thanks for meeting with us. Of course, I'm always happy to discuss business, he replied, a smirk creeping onto his face. His eyes flicked between Jesse and me, and I could sense his amusement at our presence. Jessie took a seat across from him, her posture tense. We wanted to talk about the recent situation at work, she began, her voice faltering slightly. Dawson leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. What situation? I thought we were moving forward. We're not comfortable with how you've been treating Jessie, I interjected, trying to keep the conversation on track. Threatening her career is crossing a line. Dawson's smirk widened. Oh, please. Jessie knows how this business works. If she can't handle a little pressure, maybe she doesn't belong here. Jessie's eyes flared with anger, but I squeezed her hand under the table, silently urging her to hold her ground. This isn't just pressure. It's harassment, she said, her voice gaining strength. You can't intimidate me into silence. Dawson's expression shifted, a hint of irritation creeping in. You really think you can take me down? I have connections that you couldn't even begin to understand. He shot back, his tone sharp. We're not here to threaten you. We're simply asking you to stop, I said, trying to remain calm. Dawson leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You think you can just waltz in here and demand things from me? You're mistaken, he sneered. Suddenly, Jessie found her voice. You're not invincible, Dawson. People talk, and if you keep this up, the truth will come out, she said, her confidence surprising even me. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of concern in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Is that a threat? He challenged, leaning back in his chair. Jessie held her ground. No, it's a promise. We're not afraid of you anymore. The air in the cafe grew thick with tension as Dawson's expression darkened. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, he said, his voice low and menacing. We're ready for whatever you throw our way, I said, feeling emboldened by Jessie's courage. Dawson shot us a final glare, his arrogance barely masking the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Fine, but mark my words, you'll regret this, he spat, pushing back his chair and standing up abruptly. As he stormed out of the cafe, I turned to Jessie, feeling a rush of pride for her bravery. You did great, I said, squeezing her hand. She took a deep breath, her eyes wide with adrenaline. Do you think we really got through to him? I think we rattled him, I replied. And now we just have to stay vigilant. He won't back down without a fight. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. We were standing together, ready to face whatever came next, and for the first time in a while it felt like we had the upper hand. After our tense meeting with Dawson, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Jessie and I returned home, both exhausted but filled with a newfound determination. We knew Dawson would retaliate. It was just a matter of when. Over the next few weeks, we focused on gathering more evidence against him. We documented every interaction we had with him, compiling emails, messages, and witness statements from colleagues who had seen his inappropriate behavior. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in the wall we were building against him. One evening, As I was reviewing some documents, Jessie walked in with a worried look on her face. "I just got a call from HR. They want to meet with me again tomorrow," she said, her voice laced with anxiety. "Do you think it's about Dawson?" I asked, putting my papers down and focusing my attention on her. "Maybe. I told them everything that happened, but I don't know what they'll do next," she said, biting her lip. "Just stay calm and stick to your story. We have all the evidence to back you up," I reassured her. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The next day, Jessie left for her meeting with HR, and I paced around the house, anxiety gnawing at my insides. I wanted to be there for her, but I knew this was something she had to handle alone. Hours later, Jessie returned home, her expression a mix of relief and frustration. "It was worse than I thought," she said, sinking onto the couch. "They said they're going to conduct an internal investigation, but Dawson is claiming it was all consensual. That son of a—" I started, but Jessie held up her hand to silence me. "They said if they find that I fabricated any of this, it could lead to disciplinary action against me," she explained, shaking her head in disbelief. "Dawson is trying to turn this around on you. We have to be prepared for everything," I said, pacing again. "We'll gather more evidence and start reaching out to your colleagues. They'll support you." Jessie nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "You're right. I need to talk to people who saw how he acted toward me. If I can get them to speak up, it will help my case." That night, we started reaching out to some of Jessie's coworkers, asking for their testimonies regarding Dawson's behavior. To our surprise, several of them agreed to speak with HR, sharing their observations and experiences. As the investigation continued, Jessie received a call from an unexpected source, Dawson's assistant. "I just wanted to let you know that he's been talking about you behind your back," she said, her voice tense. "He's spreading lies about you to try to save his reputation." "Why are you telling me this?" Jessie asked, skepticism evident in her tone. "I can't stand the way he treats people." "I think you deserve to know," the assistant replied, her voice shaking slightly. "He thinks he's untouchable, but he's not. I'll help you in any way I can." Jessie thanked her, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease. We began to realize that Dawson's facade was starting to crack. The more people we spoke to, the clearer it became that his behavior wasn't just a secret between us. Others had witnessed it too. One evening, I came home to find Jessie sitting on the couch with her laptop open. "You won't believe this," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "I found a whole thread on a forum where people are sharing their experiences with Dawson. He's done this before." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning closer to see the screen. "They're saying he has a history of manipulating and bullying women in the workplace. If we can get these stories, we might be able to build a stronger case against him," she explained, her voice bubbling with hope. We spent the next few days reaching out to these individuals, asking if they would be willing to speak with HR and share their stories. To our surprise, many agreed, furious that Dawson had gotten away with his behavior for so long. As the investigation drew nearer to a close, Dawson seemed more erratic. He began making snide comments whenever he saw Jessie at work, and it was clear he was desperate to maintain control. "You think you can take me down, Jessie? You don't know what you're dealing with," he sneered during a chance encounter in the hallway. "Just wait and see," she shot back, her confidence bolstered by the support we had gathered. Finally, the day of the HR meeting arrived. Jessie and I walked in, armed with evidence and support from her colleagues. The room was tense as we took our seats across from the HR representatives. "Thank you for coming in today," the head of HR said, her voice steady but cautious. "We've reviewed the testimonies and evidence provided, and we're prepared to discuss the next steps." As they laid out the findings, I could feel Jessie's anxiety simmering just below the surface. They had corroborated several accounts against Dawson, and the atmosphere in the room shifted as they informed us of their decision. "Dawson will be placed on leave while we conduct further investigations, and we will ensure you are provided with a safe working environment," the HR head concluded. "We take these allegations very seriously." Jessie and I exchanged glances, relief flooding through us. Dawson's power was slipping away, and it felt incredible. As we walked out of the meeting, Jessie turned to me, a mix of emotions swirling in her eyes. "We did it, Sam. We actually did it." "Yes, we did. But we need to stay vigilant. This isn't over until he's held accountable," I reminded her. Days turned into weeks, and Dawson's leave turned into termination. The news spread through the office, and while some were shocked, most were relieved. Jessie began to rebuild her confidence, finding new opportunities and leaving the toxic environment behind. As we moved forward, the bond between us deepened. We'd faced adversity together, and I saw a strength in Jessie that I admired more than ever. In time, the pain and anger faded, replaced with hope for a better future. We learned that we could overcome anything, as long as we stood together. And as we embraced this new chapter in our lives, I felt grateful for the journey we'd shared, the battles fought, and the love that had emerged stronger than ever.